All right. We're back for Friday, May 19th with GPS Live. We do not have Jonathan with us today. He had a family obligation pop up, and so he couldn't be here today. And so instead, we are joined by Mario Campusano. Mario, how are you doing today?
Good, Tristan. Thanks for having me on today. How's everyone doing out there?
Well, hopefully they are doing pretty well. Speaking of which, if you are watching live right now or even on demand, you can do this. But if you're watching live with us right now, you can go ahead and leave comments. We see those come in. We can talk to you guys directly through those. So go ahead and drop a comment if you have some thoughts on what's going on. But yeah, like I said, Jonathan's going to be out today. Mario, just by way of introduction, a little bit about yourself and what you do here at GuidePoint.
Sure, sounds good. Yeah, I'm a senior security engineer or a sales engineer. I support all the account executives in the Southeast region, covering Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, South Carolina, and Florida. Just working with all the account executives to help them put solutions together for our customers and clients and prospects. I got about 25 years in the industry. CISSP, I currently teach at Kennesaw State University. And just been in every area of security imaginable. So I'm a dinosaur.
Been at it for a while. Well, that's awesome. So I'm going to put our little banner up here. So for May 19th, 2023, we actually have some pretty interesting stories to go over today. We're going to be talking about some password vulnerabilities and flaws. We are going to be talking about some changes that 1Password is introducing that are pretty awesome. Some data breaches and some vulnerabilities in Microsoft Secure Boot. And so we're going to cover all that in just a second. But before we do need to go ahead and throw up our disclaimer. Views and opinions expressed by Mario and myself are our own. We don't necessarily reflect GuidePoint's direct views. It's just two guys talking about cybersecurity and having a good time. So if we say anything incredibly stupid, hold it against us and not against GuidePoint. That being said, hopefully we don't say anything too stupid. But let's get it kicked off here so that we can make good use of everyone's time. I think that the first one that I want to talk about is just kind of, it's a shorter story. We don't have to spend too long on it. But I picked it up for just kind of the idea of the conversation that we could have about it. And that is that Discord has disclosed a new data breach. This story was posted on May 12th, so just at the beginning of the week. And it's coming to us from bleepingcomputer.com. But Discord has notified users of a data breach that occurred because a third-party support agent was compromised. Now, you might be wondering what this would really have to do with kind of organizational security, your corporate cybersecurity kind of aspects. But I was looking at this from the perspective of the recent story that we had with the leaks from the Pentagon that were done through Discord. So the fact that like these free applications that are used by individuals to talk to their friends, do stuff like gaming, kind of unwind, can also still be vectors of compromise for an organization, whether that be through leaks like what we saw with the I forget. I don't want to say airman because he wasn't actually in the Air Force, but with the guy who was leaking things from the Pentagon. But also, if someone were to install this on their work computer just to be able to chat with their friends. So yeah, Mario. Looking at the story, as it's laid out, this was a compromise of a third-party support agent. I think also there's some conversation that we could probably have there around, you're not necessarily supply chain. That's not the right term, right? But third-party compromise and how that's linked back to your business. You say you've been doing this for about 25 years. So like, I think you were telling a couple stories before we started too. What's your kind of experience there with that third-party risk?
To me, third-party risk is something that's serious taking place. I mean, there's a lot of vendors out there that help organizations with determining, who you should be playing in the sand with, right? From that perspective. But anytime you install a third-party application, you have you had the ability to vet that, right? Have you gone to your company IT or security group and vetted that software to see if there's any issues with it, if it's very prone to have malware, if it's coming from some country or organization that actually hosts malware or terrorism or anything like that. So it's a risky proposition, right? Especially if you're installing it on a work computer. I mean, the amount of information go out from the third-party software is very extensive. So not an area that I like to participate in, obviously. I'm always of the mind frame where I want to make sure what we install is a whitelisted application as we speak. So yeah, it's concerning because you'll probably see more and more of these, unless companies decide to lock down end user systems. So I mean, these are an easy avenue in, right?
Yeah.
Where it's not something that's controlled by the company themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, and and in this case, it was that third-party support agent that Discord was using that was breached, but that exposed their ticket queue, any information that users had sent as part of tickets, emails, anything like that. And so when you're looking at this from that side too, if someone is using an application like this on a work computer or even just near, right, like. Not necessarily a work computer, but like if they ever take work home and they do anything on their personal laptop, which is again bad idea, or if you let them bring your own device for phones, right? A lot of people are going to have this installed on their phone. There's no telling what kind of information could be in those support tickets that would then give someone access to their accounts in Discord and therefore to further in to try and compromise things.
Yeah, I mean, from a privacy perspective, that to me is huge, right? Because I mean, some people don't think about what they're sharing, right? I always tell friends when I talk to, or even students at my school, if you put it out there on the internet, you're basically risking someone potentially stealing it, compromising it, abusing it, etc. So careful what you put out there, right? Think about that privacy aspect. A lot of people don't do that.
Yep. And then so the next story that I wanted to talk about, kind of dovetail away from that. I feel like it was a quick story to talk about. Hey, here's what's going on. But the next one to come up here. Let me say, hold on, my computer's glitching out a little bit. Was the Microsoft's new Secure Boot vulnerability. You had some interesting thoughts on this one.
Yeah, this brings me back to almost 10 years ago when a certain virus scan vendor released batches that basically wiped out the boot sector of the hard drives on the Windows machines, and it was a nightmare, right? So it's one of these things where the patch has been released basically to fix an issue they tried to fix back in January, right? And it's a constant thing that happens, with Microsoft. I mean, they're always trying to better the patch, right? And it seems like whenever they release something on their I call it Terrible Tuesday, but anyway, it's always something just to kind of button it up, Band-Aid, right? I mean, if you look at the actual story online, they have a big blue Band-Aid there, right? So it's a constant struggle with them, and I get it. They're a huge OS footprint out there, so everybody's going to try and compromise them, right? Whether it's a publicly reported or it's a privately reported vulnerability. So but yeah, I mean, I've seen something like this happen in the past, and it's a little nerve-wracking. It really is.
Yeah, this one's pretty. It's pretty in depth and complex just from the story as I was reading it. But basically, this is a vulnerability within Secure Boot. They had released a fix for the original vulnerability, CVE 2022 21894. That was patched in January.
Mm-hmm.
But now a new patch has come out for another actively exploited workaround, 24932. For Windows 10 11, servers going all the way back to 2008. But the interesting thing about this one is that it's going to take a really long time to patch, to nearly a year, as the story says on Ars Technica, to finish patching this new 0 day, because of the way that they have to roll this patch out. Because basically the patch itself, if applied incorrectly, will just brick all of your systems.
Yeah, I mean, they're in the registry, right? And
yeah,
they're tweaking here, tweaking there, and as we all know, being good technicians in the day, you don't go into the registry unless you really have to make that change, because one little wrong change can basically, I won't be able to reboot or boot up anymore. So
yeah. So what this one actually does is, if it's not applied properly, basically once that fix has been enabled, if you try to boot from older bootable media that doesn't include the fixes, I mean, that's a long list of things. You just can't boot, right? That's install DVDs and USB drives using Microsoft's ISO files, Windows install images that IT uses, full system backups, networks, network boot drives, like all of basically any way to boot your computer is just gone, unless you apply this really properly. So they're going to be rolling out the update over the next few months, but the initial versions of it require like really substantial, heavy user intervention. So you apply like the May security update, and then it's a 5-step process of manually verifying and placing a pair of revocation files to update the hidden EFI boot partition in the registry. That's a lot of work that I'm really curious how this is going to be applied en masse by organizations. Right? Like how are you going to verify that this is properly done on every machine if you have to go through that manual 5-step process?
Well, this is where the thought process of we have to make sure that we have a good QA environment in place to test. Obviously, we don't want to go into production before we do this. Otherwise, we break everything. Not in a good place to be.
Yeah. So coming up in July, though, they are going to be releasing a new update that will not enable the patch by default, but it's going to make it easier to enable on your own. And then a third update in the first quarter of 2024 to enable it by default. So they're trying to accelerate that schedule. But obviously there's a lot of, when you're the largest, one of the largest OS providers in the world, right? You've got a lot of things to take into account, especially with this going all the way back to something like Server 2008.
Yeah, exactly. And it does bring a good point, though. I mean, a lot of companies are very quick to jump and go ahead and install an update and such. And I'll bring back to my previous example of the virus scan company. If you have the ability to test, do so. Most of the bulletins that Microsoft releases, I mean, they categorize them: critical, high, medium, low, etc. But are they truly critical in your environment? Are they truly high, truly medium, right? Your environment is something that Microsoft cannot really reproduce. If they did, they wouldn't have the funds to function, right? I mean, think about this. Your environment can have a lot of, and I'm going to put the air quotes, compensating controls in place, which may make a bulletin not critical. But if you want to have an internal threat actor, that doesn't matter, right? At the end of the day, if someone's in there, they're going to get control. So if you have the ability to test the patches beforehand, it's highly recommended, because you don't know how it's going to act. I mean, we can go all the way back to the Java days, right? The Java days, I mean, how many releases did they do on a weekly basis? And every time someone tried to patch Java, it would break an application. So they would go 2 or 3 or 4 iterations of it without patching and just stay vulnerable just because their applications needed to function.
Yep. It's a tough place to be in when you are the sole source and driving force behind most of the tech of the day. But speaking of patches that are going to take a while to apply, actually, for critical vulnerabilities, it's funny that we've got 2 stories on this kind of thing. But we do have a good story coming up at the end. So there's a story to leave on a happy note. But Our next story here, coming from HelpNet Security. There's a new flaw in KeePass that allows the retrieval of the master password, and unfortunately, the proof of concept is already public. Now, if you don't know, if you're not familiar, KeePass is, I believe it's an open source password management tool. And the flaw that is here exploits a vulnerability or the way that it handles memory strings, so that basically the master password is just stored in a way not as one unit, but in a way that would allow anyone to just kind of work out what your master password is. The POC exploitation is rather aptly named KeePass 2.x master password dumper. I mean, you can't get a little bit more on the nose than that. But it's publicly available. But the good news here is that it cannot be exploited remotely, just by exploiting the flaw. Someone already has to have access to the system, whether that be, through a remote connection that enables them with user access, or direct access to the machine itself.
Yeah. So to quote the OS company, someone has to do something to spawn something to have something. So, the planets have to align, et cetera, et cetera. So there is some safety aspect to this, right? And this is where we were talking about earlier. User training really comes into play, right? You train your users not to click on the links, not to do anything, visit malicious sites and stuff like that. Be careful. You could potentially avoid this one.
Yep. And granted, KeePass, it's probably not the enterprise password manager solution for your organization, right? But again, users like to use what they're going to use, and so there's no stopping really if someone wants to install a browser plugin or something like that to use their own personal passwords. And then, users are always going to do what is most convenient for them, right? Storing a work password in their personal, because it's something that they have to access all the time or something like that, is not out of the realm of possibility.
You mean the spreadsheet doesn't work anymore?
Yeah, you don't just use a Google Sheet stored. But if the computer's already infected by malware running in the background that gives someone remote access, then you're already kind of in trouble. But one of the things that they do note in here is, someone getting access to your computer for some kind of forensic analysis, or letting someone use your computer at your house or something like that, right? All of these things are possible ways for this to be exploited. But specifically what this vulnerability does is it affects Secure Text Box EX, the software's custom text box for entering a master password and passwords during the editing of those password fields. But basically you get the process dump, the pagefile.sys swap file, and the hibernation file or RAM dump of the entire system. So if you get one of those, then you get access to this. And the way that it works is Mario, you've seen this a billion times. Anyone who's watching has seen this a billion times. As you're typing a password in, it doesn't fill in the actual letters. It fills in with those bullets. Right. But every letter that you press, it does verify that single character for just a brief moment for you. And so as the password is being typed, it is creating a leftover string in the memory for KeePass. Which then if someone were to gain access to, they would just see a long string of, bullet. If your password was password, right, they would see bullet A, and then another string that says bullet S, another one bullet S, and they can just put that all together to figure out what your password is. Unfortunately, they don't get the first character of the password, but there's not that many options for the first character of a password. It wouldn't take long to run a brute force attack. But they did state that a fix is coming. So they will be releasing a fix. It has been fixed in the test version of KeePass 2.54, but the official release of that isn't expected until July. So we've got 2 months almost of running this vulnerable version that exposes that master password and therefore all of your passwords.
Yep. Just precaution, educate your users. Don't click on any links
Yep.
that you don't recognize. I mean, it has a keylogger feel to it, right? This
Right.
vulnerability, it's like someone installs a keylogger, but this is actually targeted for the password tool instead of everything on the system. So
Yeah.
which it's a pretty impressive attack.
Yeah. It is. It's always interesting to see the way that these things get exploited, but it again goes back to just that kind of building, your just your basic AppSec and your DevSecOps from the very beginning, right? Are you building security? Are you security minded in the way that you're building your application? And this, being a password manager, you would hope would have a lot of security forethought put into it. But it's also easy to miss stuff. Something like just the way that your app handles memory strings, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is out there. The POC is publicly available and in the wild. So if you are using KeePass, or you have users who are using it, definitely look into that and try and find a way to educate them, or try and lock this down on your own.
Yeah, make sure their machine's up to date on all the patches and everything. So
yeah.
Yeah.
But that takes us to our last story, which is also related to passwords. And instead of having to maintain and keep master passwords for everything, hopefully this brings us one step closer to never having to use passwords again. 1Password. They are finally rolling out passkey management inside of the 1Password application. The story is from The Verge. But basically, users will be able to save their passkeys and synchronize them across all of their devices and platforms starting on June 6th. So if you're not familiar with it, basically what this is an enhanced, a kind of like level up version of two-factor authentication, of the different methods that we currently use for verifying identities and using passwords and things like that. And what it basically allows you to do is say, if your device has biometrics on it, or other options available, across these devices, you can save these passkeys, and then you can just use that kind of authentication to immediately be able to log into these things, to these different services that offer passkey integration. But this is all tech that's been developed by the FIDO Alliance. So always excited to see tech companies like Apple, Google, and Microsoft all coming together to get behind this.
Yeah, definitely a plus out there. I mean, if the companies has the ability, people have the ability to use the MFA. Definitely, it just makes common sense, right? I mean,
right.
Look at user ID and password, so easily breached, so easily consumed, etc. I mean, stolen every day of the week, right? MFA becomes a little harder to do, unless, of course, you clone a phone, right? If you're able to clone a phone, then, you done that, right? But in the same respect, 10, 15 years ago, cloning a phone was the end thing to do. They're not doing that today now, because attackers don't have to work that hard, right? The threat actors don't have to work that hard, writing scripts and everything like that. We're going at such a fast pace that if they can figure out the way to socially engineer and entice someone to go to a site, click on a link, it's easy, right? It's like fishing in a barrel, right?
Yeah.
It's not difficult for these guys to get at the users today. So that's why I'll say it again. Education is important. That's one of your biggest defense against all these attacks, these threats, and everything.
Yep. And what this does, though, speaking of multi-factor authentication, the various methods that you would normally use for 2FA, or getting like an SMS, right? What this does is the reason that this is a better system is because there is no transmitted code. There's nothing for someone to intercept and steal or see on your screen and utilize. So without any transmitted code to be stolen, it inherently keeps you more secure, while still adding that additional layer of security of saying, hey, here's the thing that you have, right? Your device biometrics. This is what's going to allow you. And the other upside here with 1Password launching this is it's not ecosystem dependent, right? Apple's passkey support relies on iCloud and the iCloud keychain to sync your password across your Apple devices. Google Password Manager, right? Locked into Google's ecosystem. And I don't know if you saw it, Mario, but a few shows back, I was complaining about the process of using Google's Authenticator app to generate my two-factor codes.
Yep.
When I got a new phone, that doesn't transfer over automatically. And because I got a new phone, because my old phone screen had died, it was a long process for me to gain access back to those two-factor authentication codes. So being agnostic of that kind of ecosystem is really great for 1Password, because it's going to allow someone to say, like, well, I have this and I can just get to 1Password no matter what device I'm on, and then access my passkeys from there. So this is really exciting. Hopefully we're moving towards that kind of passwordless future that we've all been yearning for. Never having to remember a password again in my life would be phenomenal. And so, yeah, really exciting that this is coming out. And as an important note, though, they are not replacing master passwords with passkeys, right? That's not rolling out in this update yet. So that actually brings us to the end, unless you've got any other thoughts there, Mario?
No. Thank you for having me on this week. It was a pleasure to be here. Enjoyed the conversation, the topics, and everything like that. And yep, we're here to answer any questions for you if you like.
So thanks so much for joining us, folks. Giving us some of your time on a Friday. I know some of you are probably eating lunch right now, so we really appreciate that. But yeah, we will be back again next week with some more stories. Jonathan should be back as well. And on behalf of GuidePoint Security, until then, I have been and will continue to be Tristan Morris.
And I am Mario Camposano. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and we will catch you all next time.